live from our studios on Ntinda 2 Road. You can visit us and see what the station is like. But we're glad that you're joining us for this edition of the show. It is the 9th of March 2022, which is just a day after International Women's Day. So our topic today will focus on Women's Day. Yesterday, Uganda joined the global community in commemorating International Women's Day. Reflections were made on the journey of women, how far we have come in building the women's agenda, in building the confidence, in building a future for the women of Uganda and the globe at large. Also, stock was taken on government's interventions. In fact, there was a ceremony at Kololo International Ceremonial Grounds where a number of speeches were made. The president decided to focus on the parish development model and what that will mean for the women of Uganda. Away from that, other political parties had their own ceremonies, and what dominated the conversation at these ceremonies were the failures of government, the fact that more needs to be done to build the Ugandan woman. Well, how far have we come, and how far do we need to go to break the biases? We have a panel of two. Let's meet our panelists.
Our panel tonight, OHTwa Christine Mugeraka-Sule is the Deputy Secretary General of the Democratic Party, the oldest political party in Uganda. Christine Mugeraka-Sule is an experienced consultant with a demonstrated history of working in the legal services industry. She is skilled in non-profit organizations, arbitration, dispute resolution, editing, and legal writing. She has experience in areas such as law, gender, human rights organization assessment, and development research. She has previously served as an executive assistant to the Inspector General of Government, and she has also served as the Minister for Cabinet and Parliamentary Affairs in Buganda Kingdom. Anne Adeke Ebaju is a Ugandan lawyer and politician who is currently serving as the Member of Parliament representing women in Soroti districts. She previously served as the parliamentary representative of the National Female Youth Constituency in the 10th Parliament. She serves as the Deputy President of the Forum for Democratic Change Party in the Eastern region. In 2017, the Ugandan magazine listed her among the 10 most powerful women in Ugandan politics, and she is known for being passionate about gender and feminism issues. On several occasions, she has publicly condemned sexual harassment, urging women and the public to speak out. Recently, on International Women's Day, Anne Adeke Ebaju spoke out against the skyrocketing commodity prices and tokenism, which she says is still a major challenge. Ladies and gentlemen, our panel.
Well, there you are. Those are our panelists for today. The only panelist that has not been introduced is you, because we'd like to hear from you. So use the hashtag SEETV Big Debate so that we can get your views, your comments on the journey of the Ugandan woman and how much more needs to be done. Well, we have a Vice President. Deputy President. It is actually Deputy President, yes, from the FDC party, and a Deputy Secretary General from the Democratic Party. Ladies, welcome to the Big Debate.
Thank you very much.
All right, let me start by finding out, what did you do yesterday to commemorate, to celebrate International Women's Day? Honorable Anne.
Well, thank you very much, and good evening to the listeners, and thank you for tuning in. So yesterday, the Forum for Democratic Change Party held an event at our headquarters in Najanankombe to commemorate International Women's Day under the auspices of our Women's League. We invited our chairpersons and vulnerable women, women that identify with our party, to come and share their stories and try and redefine our path as women in creating a much better Uganda. So we did have an event. It was graced by some party officials like the Lord Mayor, who's also a Deputy President, some members of Parliament, the Women's League, the Deputy Lord Mayor, who's a lady, and so many of our leaders. Yes.
All right. Had you been invited to Kololo?
Well, there was an open invite for all MPs. Usually for national functions, we receive invites. All of us receive invites, yes.
How come you didn't go to Kololo?
Well, I really didn't have reason to go to Kololo. Because the way I see our journey as women is not the way, the president sees it. It's not the way, maybe it's a bit different from what people or supporters of the status quo see our journey and our plight as women.
All right. We'll come back to you to hear how you see the journey and the plight of the women. OHT, how did you commemorate International Women's Day?
First of all, personally, I had a wonderful day with some very good women in my life. I had a personal celebration that I wound up with by going to CBS and radio, where I featured on a talk show together with one of the commissioners of the Leadership Code Tribunal. So that's what I did yesterday. I had, we decided as a party not to put anything on Women's Day, apart from a press conference, because you know very well that the Democratic Party addresses a press conference every Tuesday without fail. So this press conference was dedicated to the women, because it was our day, and it was addressed by the president of the DP Women's League. When we decided not to do that, we thought we shouldn't take away from the celebrations that were happening nationally, because we would like to celebrate with sisters across the spectrum. So we chose that we will celebrate another day. We are going to have an event to which our sisters will be invited, and I hope, Anne, you'll be able to join us as well, because we are going to call also women from sister parties. Yeah.
All right. As a party, didn't you want your celebration to also stand out, like the FDC did?
You know, you don't stand out when everybody is celebrating.
All right.
So we were not
You
going
wait for a less crowded day.
Yes, we wanted a less crowded day, because we want our sisters from across the political divide, our sisters from civil society, our partners in every way, to be part of the celebration.
All right.
So we also wanted to join the rest of the country to celebrate, because it is the day that is organized at national level and international level.
All right.
So we knew that there would be celebrations everywhere. But we didn't want to celebrate just as the DP women. We want to celebrate with every woman that can join us in our celebrations.
All right. I think it's important for me to mention at this point that we actually made an invitation to the NRM. So the absence of somebody from the NRM, from government, is not for failure of trying. We actually did try. And actually the last person said, you know what, it's okay, have the debate, we will watch, and we'll find another day to respond. I think they believe that the ladies are not going to be too kind to, to what government has done. So I will come back to you, OHT Christine. In your view, where is the Ugandan woman at the moment?
I'd like to say that the Ugandan woman has made very great strides. I always tell people that, you know, there are so many things that today's woman takes for granted that were actually the result of a protracted struggle by women that came before us. And this struggle started way back, because even, you know, girls could not go to school. The formal education, when it was established, girls couldn't go to school. And so it is no wonder that we fell behind in a lot of things, you know. And even when we went to school, there were certain subjects we could not do. So the fact that now I sit here as a lawyer, meaning I went to law school, some woman activists way before I came along made that path easy for me. So I find it really comfortable to say that we've made great strides, but we haven't yet arrived. And I know that the Ugandan women are going to make even bigger strides, provided we have an enabling environment. And right now, the environment is steadily getting more and more restrictive. And when the environment gets restrictive, then women's rights suffer the most. So that is where now, right now, that's where the Ugandan woman is. She made a lot of great strides, but as the political space constricts, her rights are now in danger. And we have to pull up our socks and really get into the arena and fight.
All right.
Harder.
Honorable Adeka, let's get your view on where the Ugandan woman is.
Okay, well, it depends on how you want to see the glass, if you want to see it half empty or half full.
How do you see it?
I think both ways. I think to say that I see it half empty would be to look down on the struggles of many women that lay down their lives and dreams to make sure that we got to where we get to. You see the likes of Sarah and Tiro who were chased out of mathematics classes. And it's been a struggle to get to where we are. I would not entirely credit it to, political space enabling us to do this. I think that the late 90s had, a global movement for women emancipation, and it was close to impossible for any government to continue to exist without championing the cause of women. But nonetheless, the frameworks are in place. The average frameworks are in place. And they're really the reason as to why we have made such great strides and advanced to where we are. Listening to Owechitiwa give us, her experience is much different, because when I came into, the public space as a young girl growing up, I found, different challenges, but not as much as they were before. And I think that the Ugandan woman is still struggling. We still struggle with so many basic things that I honestly feel would need serious political goodwill to fix in our country. Because I come from the countryside, I represent a rural constituency, and I see the challenges of the average Ugandan woman and the average Ugandan girl who goes to primary 1 in UPE, in a UPE school, and can't advance beyond primary 4 because she cannot access sanitary towels. Because it's not that her parents don't think school is a priority. It's that they are struggling and living from hand to mouth. She gets a UPE education because it's literally free. Because their sustenance is on agriculture that has changed with the climate patterns. You find families like those, are farming. They farm maize, and what they get is less than what they put in the garden. If they use 350,000 to invest, they get just 100,000 to invest. And that is their only source of livelihood. And so when a girl comes to the parent and says, monthly, I need 3,500 shillings, it's almost close to impossible for them to afford. So we still see the Ugandan girl and woman being, especially the average one, being condemned to having very slim chances of succeeding. And I firmly believe that this is really about political goodwill.
All right. Political goodwill, but doesn't that contradict, what you said earlier, that, the frameworks have been put in place? And
you see, Gabriel, I said that the wave in the 90s and early 2000s made it almost impossible for any government to exist without them facilitating women's advancement, women's growth, without them actually investing in women emancipation. There were global protocols being made. There were global declarations, treaties, all of which our countries were member to. So you cannot really credit it to one government doing this. It's been a global wave. There are treaties and conventions in place that have brought women globally to where we are today. CEDAW, Beijing Declaration, the Ethiopia Declaration on Gender Equality, 1990. Was it 2004? Yes, that's Addis Ababa, the Solemn Declaration on Gender Equality. So they are binding instruments. Of course, naturally, our constitution has to fit in so that they are not contradictory to each other. So I think now it makes sense. I'm not saying that it's something that could not be fought. Yes.
All right. You did talk about a shrinking space. What exactly do you mean by that?
Spaces for women have always been a challenge, and they continue to be a challenge. She has talked about Sarah Antiro. Sarah Antiro was a brilliant mathematician who went to class at university in a mathematics class, and the mathematics teacher walked out saying he does not teach women. So she had to go and study something else.
Because till that point, this lecturer had not taught a female in the mathematics class.
Yes, but I mean, when you're a teacher, you teach people that are presented to you, people who have qualified to sit in your class. And she qualified to sit in that class. There are spaces, there are so many, until, and I'd like to differ from Anne and say that, the reason why governments, had to do this, the reasons government did that is because there had been a lot of struggle at a global level as well as at local levels. In 1975, for the first time, the United Nations declared the Decade of Women. When it came to our backyard in 1985, they were reviewing what had been achieved since 1975. 1985, it came in literally into our backyard in Nairobi. And that is when Ugandan women, some of whom had been in the 1975 UN conference, now in 1985, we had an even bigger delegation. When the current, the NRA took power in 1986, they found women who were already on a journey. And they found, even within their ranks, the women that were there were also saying, we have space. But the problem is that, these spaces, when women are there, they write the history in such a way that the women are missing. When they talk about the bush struggle, you hardly hear about the women who were in the bush struggle, and there were many.
Well, you get to hear about the women. They hid us, they gave us food.
But that's a great contribution.
That's the problem. They don't name them.
Yeah. So and this has been going on because when you look even way back, we've had to we look for women. The first martyr should have been a woman, because she was the first person to be killed for her religious beliefs. It was a woman. But because, when people are writing history. And I don't like to call it history because it should be their story. Yeah, it's their story because men and women coexist And they
you're
bring...
taking issue with the
Not
HIS in the
Yes.
history.
Yes, because we cannot say his story, we cannot say her story. It should be their story. It's a story for a people that have struggled to get where they are getting. Because as societies move, there's a contribution by the women and there's a contribution by the men. But when you underlook the contribution of the women, that's why you see their spaces are hardly there. The first women who went into the Ugandan parliament did not find toilets. The Ans are enjoying toilets because those women...
On every level.
On every level. Now, these women had to walk to the National Theatre to be able to go to the toilet. Can you imagine that?
Interestingly, I've never heard that story.
The spaces...
So the toilets in parliament were exclusively for men?
Yes. So if she needed to go to the toilet, she had to go to the National Theatre. She had to take that walk. Meanwhile, parliamentary business is going on. So when we talk about space, we mean both physical and otherwise.
All right, and you say that the space is now shrinking.
It is shrinking because, and as far as I'm concerned, because when we did the advocacy in the 90s, the advocacy we were doing was literally to get women into spaces, into decision making, into higher positions in the public service, in higher positions of leadership. And the negotiation could only go up to 1/3. And yet women constitute half the population in this country.
Or more than.
51%.
Slightly more than.
Yes. So, I mean, ideally it means that the parliament should be split down halfway by gender.
There had to be
and
a
every
beginning
space.
point.
Okay, that's the beginning point, but why haven't we moved on from the beginning point since 1995? So when we say that, the spaces are shrinking, they should be expanding, but they are shrinking because people don't want us to go beyond the 1/3. And yet we wanted...
Some interesting figures were given yesterday, and I am sure that even if you were not in Kololo, you did follow some of these figures. For example, the fact that Parliament has the representation of women in Parliament has grown significantly. The President used an example and said, if it was about direct seats, we would have only 26 women in Parliament. But now, 33.8% of that Parliament where you sit are female. 44% of cabinet are
43.
female. Well, 43. Well, the figure they were using yesterday was 44. And probably rounding off to the nearest whole number, maybe it's a 43.2 or something.
Okay.
And high up in cabinet, vice president, prime minister, key, ministries in the hands of women. And the government, the NRM, is thumping its chest for this journey made. Because, yes, we have started by looking back and how bad it was then. Therefore, praise for where we're at now. Honorable.
Well, I listened. I actually did listen to the speech, but I tuned in, and it was just the moment he was, giving us the figures and saying, if it was only constituencies, we wouldn't have all these women that we have in Parliament. But frankly speaking, yes, 33%. But it's not okay. I don't even want to say that it's okay, because I know what those numbers are like in Parliament. If you put critical matters to vote, I remember, I think in the 9th Parliament, when the Marriage and Divorce Bill was introduced.
Yes.
And how men fundamentally disagreed with women about some clauses that they felt made them vulnerable as men. And how women really lost the vote because of that. So even if you have all the 33 or 34 or maybe 35%.
In the 9th Parliament, it was lower, right?
It was much lower then.
Yeah, it was much
but you
lower
see,
than
we talk about 30. Yeah, we talk about 30 because it's a third. So you just, almost. So about 30% of the women, even if you had them vote for this cause, still it failed on that basis. But then again, quite practically speaking, the district women representative seat is a very, very difficult seat for women. And increasingly, with how much commercialized our politics is getting, it's actually seemingly easier for men who stand in constituencies as compared to women. Women seem to carry a much bigger, burden or task. I don't want to call it a burden because it's service. And the expectations, first of all, the general expectations of society from a woman are generally higher than they expect from men, number one. Now, when they find a woman in leadership, it is almost triple that than what they expect from men. I say it with experience because I know in my constituency what they expect of me and how much they expect from my male colleagues. First of all, they'll feel they can run to you because they know you're motherly. And by motherly, you can receive everyone and try to fix everything. So we have women in parliament who are carrying a load, and their male counterparts don't carry that load. They carry the load of the constituency. They carry the load of their families. Remember, they are caregivers, their mothers, their wives. Generally, when you look at how much they can deliver based on the load they start with, it's much less than what the males will be able to deliver. But away from that, we must take away, tokenism and surface diversity. What I call by surface diversity is that because you know now that there are so many women and they support you, and women are critical, there are, a critical population. You say, oh, now I'm going to appoint women so that also women are comfortable, so that now the women are comfortable that they have a face. But yes, someone is appointed because, yes, they are a woman, they're from a certain region that is underprivileged, so they tick all those boxes. But what qualities do they bring to the table? After you have ticked all those boxes that I'm a woman, I'm from a very underprivileged constituency, a marginalized community, I am of probably this age group, how much of that do you bring to the table? And how does it translate to actually changing the lives of that critical population which you are chosen to represent at that organ of decision making? For me, it is more than just surface diversity. It should be something that directly changes the lives of women and girls. It is not about tokenism. And yes, I know that, people clap their hands for...
Oh yes, there was quite a bit of applause yesterday.
Yes, it is true. They clap their hands that we are in parliament. But what has our presence in parliament really done for women and girls? I mean, you look at cases like right now, presently, the crisis that we are facing. Women cannot even buy a bar of soap. They can't even buy a packet of salt. You know what that's going to do with the domestic violence cases? Women are getting more vulnerable, especially in the aftermath of the COVID pandemic.
Some key legislation has actually been passed. Yes, marriage and divorce, and that bill has changed names a couple of times. That one has been problematic to pass, but you did process the succession law. You did look at gender GBV laws. You did look at, even when the issues of amendments to land laws came in, women's voices were, critically listened to. The Public Finance Management Act, requiring that that ministries have a certificate of gender equity. And those are, key decisions made, key, ways in which the women came in a very critical way in order, to tilt things in the favor of the women who cannot sit in that house. That should be applauded, shouldn't it?
Yes, but you see, it's not the law, it's the spirit of the law. And like I said, it's lacking. We may make the best laws, but the spirit of the laws is lacking. The spirit, the will to implement those laws as we make them is absent. I'll tell you that for sure. Because if that was the case, then, you know, we would be seeing more investment in the critical sectors that affect women. If you're investing in health, you're going to invest in primary health care, because you know that is where rural women are. That is where they struggle with their children to get immunization. That is where they go and get, you know, maternity health care. But we are still struggling with high maternity mortality rates while we are investing in, something like Luboa Hospital. I didn't want to have to say it, but yes.
All right. Well, let's allow, you know, Wechitiwa Christian to weigh in on what the Honorable Adeke looks at as, or describes as, surface diversity. You know, I'm sure you did listen in, or at least you have read reports of, you know, what happened at Kololo yesterday, and you know, the account given during the celebration yesterday of the journey, specifically the 36 years under the NRM, and how there's been a specific, you know, focus on raising the level of the Ugandan woman.
First of all, let me say that I agree with what the Honorable has said, that indeed there has not been much transformation in the lives of women. And I've told you that, you know, we wanted to start somewhere and get somewhere. But has the laws, the frameworks, they are in place? Some of them, they are not the way we wanted them to be, but at least they achieved something. You say like the succession law, we finally got the law against domestic violence. But, you know, when you look at, you have to ask yourself, has it changed the lives of women? Has it, for instance, if you're telling us domestic violence is increasing, we are not seeing a reduction in cases. And I can tell you, because I was part of advocacy for most of these laws. I was part of the advocacy for that, for the Marriage and Divorce Bill, for the Domestic Violence Act. But, you know, the Domestic Violence Act was only passed because a man died. But women had been dying all along, and they even die up to now. And the law is still not helping the women. So there has to be something that has to be said for you know, when you've passed the law, what next? Because you're checking boxes, saying we have this, we have that, we have a Ministry of Gender. When you have a Ministry of Gender, you don't give it enough resources. Then you say that, oh, we are trying to make sure that, you know, everybody has equal opportunities. Then you create the Equal Opportunities Commission. Then you under-resource it. Then you refuse it to recruit staff. So how is it supposed to deliver on its mandate? So for me, I would like to see, you know, that I want to see the results. I don't want, because statistics, you can read them anywhere that you want. If I say 33%, how far have we moved, you know, from what was legislated? If a woman like Anne, if she decided to stand on the constituency seat, she would be told, why don't you go back to that space that was created for women? So it means that the society...
It's a women's seat.
Yeah, because then the society has not moved. And they even have terminology that I don't agree with. And I always tell people they need to change that terminology. You know, calling the constituency seats direct seats, as if other seats are indirect, you know?
Well, I think it's because of the whole affirmative action.
Call it, then how do you, what are you going to, that seat is simply an open seat that anybody can stand for. The affirmative action seats are there to ensure that at least some people make it, who are going to give a different perspective to the policies that are being passed by Parliament. But are they transforming? If the numbers are not significant, if we don't reach critical mass, it's unlikely that anything is going to change.
All right. A critical number for you here is 44% of cabinet.
No.
Why isn't that a critical number for you? It's almost
but
at 50.
you know, I
it's
think,
just 6 shy of 50.
no, what we are talking about, let me tell you. We are talking about, when we are in a democracy, we talk about representation.
And not just, and this 44% has, you know, yes, the president is elected outside of that. The cabinet is appointed. The top 2 positions in cabinet, the vice president and the prime minister, are female.
So
The business
that's
of cabinet
the
is,
tokenism we are talking about. That you put them there, you know, and then we are supposed to be happy. No, we will not be happy
But this is what
when we see results. And
women
let me
had
tell you,
asked for this, hadn't
no,
they?
but I'm asking, why is it so difficult to give it a 50-50? The women are qualified. It's not to say that we don't have enough qualified women. We do. And when you look at it, you have to say that if we are talking about the parliament, because this is where people are represented, it is called representation. We pick members of parliament to represent us, whereby I even have an issue with who elects the women who are in parliament, who elects them.
Yes, the men do not represent men in parliament. They represent everybody, don't they?
No. A person represents based on their lived experiences and the way that their mind works. Your mind cannot work like a woman's mind. Your experiences cannot be like a woman's experiences. And vice versa. And vice versa. So, as far as I'm concerned, for me, I think that, you know, we should even, to get the 50-50, everybody should be, because even, I know Anne talked about how difficult it was when you come as a woman member of parliament. I tried that in 2011. I tried it, and I had 3 constituencies to move across, you know. In Buyikwe district, I had 3 constituencies, big. And, you know, the resources to put agents on each and every polling station. Then you get to parliament and then your pay is the same, you know, everything is the same.
Ad here started as the MP for all young
You
people.
see, Gabriel,
Our
it's so
constituency was the
unfair,
whole
by the
country.
way.
as
You
the
see,
female
You see,
member
the
of
problem, this is what I'm saying, that in this country, the more
basically you are like
marginalized,
the president.
the more marginalized you are, the harder they burden you. Because if the youth cannot be more burdened when they have fewer resources. So we must find an equation that works. This whole business. I don't even like it that women are elected by both men and women. I don't like the size of their constituency, and I do not like who elects them, because I did advocacy on that. But, you know, the Constituency Assembly Commission did not take our views. We exchanged a lot on it. I told them we want women to actually present our views. But when women are presenting women's views on issues, they call them, you know, this fundamentalist type, I don't know, you know, they have radical, they call us all sorts of things, you know.
Radical feminists.
So, but, you know, it's okay to be a radical feminist, but, you know, people make it seem as if it's a very bad thing to be a feminist.
I have met radical feminists that are male, but anyway.
So why don't we then get women to be elected by women so that they are not confused in who they are, which voice they are presenting in parliament?
Honorable Adeke, you were itching to weigh in on.
Yeah, I was just going to say that actually the affirmative action position almost so unfairly burdens women that are interested in leadership and governance in our country. Because to run for a woman a district or an MP seat, you need almost 4 times the resources that a constituency MP needs. And remember our resource distribution curve in the country. Most of the factors of production are in the hands of men. So women come to parliament with so much stress, and after carrying such a heavy load, I want to be honest with you, and they carry it on all the 5 years of their term of parliament, they carry it on. So much more. Actually, it almost feels like it's not a privilege. Actually, it shouldn't be a privilege. It almost feels that it's not, affirmative action, because it so heavily burdens you, so much more than it would be for directly elected, for the constituency seats.
For the open
that
seats.
we need to fix those problems. Naming and terminology is so important for us as women. So it's really, in really the true sense of it, after all these years of having that position, now it makes so much sense that actually women, district women representatives, struggle. So they are so heavily burdened, and it's been so unfair that I would actually moot also for a 50-50. If possible, we don't even need all these constituencies, frankly speaking, because they're actually increasing the cost of public administration on our country. You find there are men in parliament who represent 3 sub-counties. Women who represent 42 sub-counties, Kasese district. We need to, now that we are having a discussion about gender equality, we need to actually speak about parity and take away this 33% and do 50-50. Have a mandatory, for every district, a male and a female representative.
All right.
And there's no problem about that.
You've just spoken about the burden of traversing a district in order to canvass for votes. The financial cost, that won't go away because it will still be the same size, a district.
But you see, it's much simpler, because now the voters are going to have an equal chance, yes, for the men and the women, and not to so much burden only a woman. Well, we have so many things to streamline in our governance structure. Even the way we spend money in our politics is wrong. And what MPs spend money on is wrong. So we need to fix that.
All right.
However, I wanted to speak about how stunted, really, our affirmative action has become. That, 20 years down the road, we're not reviewing it. We're not reviewing it to see how effective it has been for the woman in the grassroots. So it is really honestly stunted. We get up and do things the same way, and the women who we are supposed to be speaking for, we are supposed to be representing, their lives are not changing in any way.
We're going to come to how effective it has been, especially for the women who cannot sit in these spaces. But as we plan to come to that, you both have, stayed away from a glaring comment that was made yesterday, and a comment that I have repeated here, that the number of women on cabinet has increased. It has not only increased, but the 2 most powerful positions in cabinet after the president have been given to women. The business of cabinet, and government business in parliament is in the hands of women.
May I speak to that?
Yes.
You cannot count numbers, especially when you look at cabinet, without putting into consideration the power dynamics at play. There are 44% women in cabinet, and even if there were 70% women in cabinet, the president is still the CEO of that cabinet. It's an appointive position, and they actually only answer to him. I think you heard the Minister of Lands clearly speak about who she backs for. She answers to only the president. So you cannot ask the Minister of...
You have committees in parliament that hold these ministries and ministers to account. You give oversight.
Yes, we give oversight. We have authored so many reports as parliament with recommendations to the executive. And I dare say that not more than 40% has been adopted and implemented by the executive. We have a woman in the Ministry of Lands. There have been land evictions, and women have been victims. So when we speak about surface diversity, that's exactly what we mean. That you have women in all these beautiful ministries, very powerful ministries, but they answer to the CEO. And if the great patriarch doesn't think that things should be done this way, it will remain that way.
The person you refer to as the great patriarch.
He's a patriarch.
The president of this country, in his remarks yesterday, and from the remarks of the people that came before him, they attributed the successes to deliberate policies, deliberate moves made by President Museveni's government. You did quote here, you know, the bit of the speech that you quote where he said, if we had not, he said the NRM had the policy of, or the idea to come up with this affirmative action. If we had not, we'd have only 26.
No, I have to tell you, you know,
Correct
if
that
it
record.
was the NRM's policy, there's the 10-point program. Go read it and tell me where it
women
says
feature.
women.
That
It's
is
not
the one
there.
they came with in 1986.
Yeah, but they found women
On the
who were
journey.
already working. As I told you, the UN conference in 1985 on women was just in our backyard in Nairobi. So many women in great numbers, because many couldn't go to Mexico in 1975. But many were able to go to Nairobi. Yeah, because you could even take a bus. And they came back, worked on they were already working. So when the government took over, you know, when you have to, when you're a politician and you have to conscript as many people as possible.
All right.
When you're coming, when you call yourself a revolutionary. So you have to look as if you're emancipating everybody.
All right, we've spoken quite a bit about
Gabriel,
the national
the
level.
NRM government found women on a journey. Where we are at now has been a result of decades of tireless efforts.
Advocacy.
From way before the NRM came into power. Yes, because they have been the longest serving government since. Some of these may be credited to have happened in their regime. But it became increasingly impossible to ignore or suffocate the voices of women because of fires that had been kindled long before the NRM came into power. So the NRM cannot look at the women's movement and what we've achieved and say, and thump their chest and say, oh, this is just us. We have women that sacrifice so much to bring us to where we are now.
For me, I'd like to see if they really say that they are doing lots for women. There are things that we would like to see to believe that. Yes.
Things like what?
No, because you cannot be, we've had this statistic for the longest time of women, maternal mortality, that we lose a taxi load of women daily in Uganda. Daily. And this has been, I have done advocacy for so many years, I think I'm 20 years plus, doing advocacy on women's rights. And this statistic has never changed. Why isn't it changing? Why isn't it changing? So it means that...
It could have gotten worse.
No. Let me tell you something. When they are quoting these statistics, 44... I tell people that power is something, it is tangible. When you have it, you feel it. You exercise it. Power is the ability for you to set the agenda. It's the ability for you to get things done. Now you tell me that those ministers can get things done without the say-so
For the one
from
the
the great dictator. For her, she's very kind. She's saying the great patriarch, but the great dictator. Because in a dictatorship, the voice, only one voice is heard. And if that voice was gender friendly, we would have a lot done. But I want to tell you, I was involved in advocacy for that. Finally, what they call the marriage and divorce bill. That advocacy started before I entered the women's movement, to change the laws relating to marriage and divorce and the entire domestic arena, because they were old, archaic. They were no
Colonial.
longer meeting the current needs and aspirations of women. They were actually keeping them down. So we started the advocacy. And when we did this advocacy, we reached a point where at one point we hit a very big barrier where we asked, because when you want to appeal, you send the people from the party where the head of state comes from, in the hope that they can convince the head of state. So women parliamentarians got up and they went and they asked that this law is passed. And the answer they got was something like, you mean that now my wife should be able to... How do you personalize public policy and say that, you mean when you pass this law, my wife can actually, take my land? So the way people think, why don't you legislate for your daughters? Because you love them to bits. Why don't you legislate for them? If you can't legislate so that your wife can get, legislate so that your daughter can get, your granddaughter can get.
All right. If I may come back to Honorable Adeke, in Parliament, you actually give oversight to these different ministries. Why don't you use that power to make them, because the policies are there, the frameworks are there. That means, in principle, the power, the authority has been given. At least exercise it, and the president vetoes it, but exercise it.
I think, Gabriel, you've covered Parliament for quite some time, and you can bear me witness that Parliament has on many occasions tried to swing its axe on cabinet. But because of the doctrine of separation of powers, there's only so much we can do about those ministers. They are presidential appointees at the end of the day. And also we try to appeal to them. When we find those that really have a soft heart for women, try to appeal to them and say, you really need to fix this. She's speaking about maternal mortality. Just about 3 days ago, I buried my cousin. She died giving birth. So those numbers are real. We count them. The Ministry of Health has women. The permanent secretary is a woman.
Honorable Adeke, you were there.
When she comes, we tell her about maternal mortality.
You were there in the 9th Parliament.
No, 10th.
In the 10th.
I'm not that old.
Oh, yes, you were there. You were there in the 10th Parliament. I'm trying to remember if it was the 9th Parliament or the 10th Parliament, where a member of staff, a Parliament member of staff, did lose their life while giving birth. And for the first time in that term, did we have Parliament actually starting to have, stopping and having a discussion on, maternal mortality, which begs the question, with the numbers in the House, why does it have to take that kind of thing for these issues that are critical and dear to women to be brought up? Why don't we...
No, Gabriel,
yes.
No. Please don't mislead the public. Just last week, Sarah Opendi, the chairperson of WOPA, was on the floor of Parliament about maternal health. There was a motion. We extensively discussed it. I think it was on Thursday.
Honorable, the problem with a motion is that what comes out of a motion is, a resolution of Parliament that is advisory to government. Parliament has many more powers that it can exercise that would put government in a position to actually act.
I brought that example just so I could correct that, it would take the death of someone in Parliament for us to discuss maternal mortality. We discuss maternal mortality all the time. I sit on the budget committee when the Ministry of Health brings their framework paper to us, their proposals. We are always talking about maternal health. We are talking about increasing the number of health centers, increasing the number of midwives. We have a president who all those people answer to. This president knows the number of policemen we need in our country. But has he ever spoken about the number of midwives we need in our country? Has he ever spoken? Just a few days ago, I saw his quote in the New Vision that we need about 8% when it comes to women, to say we need this number of maternity units that are well stocked. We need this number of midwives to take care of our mothers. So all these people in the executive answer to the CEO. And the CEO's preoccupation is with security and staying in power, using these institutions, defense, security, and staying in power, his longevity in power. And so he has chosen for us women to be in cabinet so that we clap and are happy. But he has not changed his interests. They are still the same. The budget priorities will show you.
All right. I will mention at this point again that we did extend an invitation to the NRIM, and therefore, you know, their absence means that some of these things will go unchallenged. But, well, like I said earlier on, they said they will watch and they will have an opportunity to respond. Back. I'd like to actually go to something that came up earlier on. What does this mean? Some of these, you know, advances, some of these wins, some of these gains, what have they actually meant for the woman at the grassroots? And I'll take from an article that I was reading earlier today. And the article, you know, put a difference between women activism and the gender or the feminist agenda, and, you know, fighting for the women. And so when we talk about, for example, you know, women having, and it's what we focused on in the first segment of the show, women having the ability to sit in these spaces and make decisions. You know, what has that meant for the woman at the last mile? Does it mean, you know, the inequalities, the services that they needed have actually, those issues have been dealt with? I will start with you, Owech-Tigwa, because you have mentioned severally on the show today that you've been in advocacy for a long time. What has that resulted for the woman at the grassroots?
I've not only been in advocacy, I've also trained some of the women that you see occupying the political space. But you know what? The women that go into these spaces, the decision-making spaces, have multiple challenges. You will find that women in the NRM party agree with us that women are in a very bad state. But the circumstances in their party does not allow them to do overt advocacy and overt challenging of the CEO, great patriarch, great dictator, whatever you want to call him. There's no space for these women to exercise. They have a lot of barriers. When you go to the lower levels, women find themselves, you're sitting in this space, you're a counselor like your fellow counselors, but when you're sitting, they assign you things like, please be in charge of welfare. And you know what being in charge of welfare means? Go and find out if our food is ready, if our tea is ready. So then you go away at a critical time of the debate. But also another thing that we have to know, the gender roles that we have and we are expected to play even when we go into leadership. I have heard a lot of women politicians saying things like, for me, when I get back home, I lift off, you know, it's like this veil. Honorable Adeke has to lift off her honorableness and leave it at the door and enter and become a wife.
And be a woman.
And become a wife. And when they say that, you know, they take off the undress, they say that, you know, neyambula, it's like you're undressing and taking off something that you wore. But I tell them, but leadership, you're a leader. It is not something you put on and take off. You're a leader all the time. So you can't say that when I walk in the door, I undress it. Why? Because it's challenging.
I hope we'll have a chance to talk about gender roles because that seems to play a big, you know,
it is one of
influence
our
quite
biggest,
a bit.
it's one of our
where we
biggest
are.
barriers, and that's what I'm trying to explain, that it is one of the biggest barriers. She goes home, she has to rush home, by the way, while the men, her fellow colleagues in parliament, will go to a bar after the session, have a discussion about matters that should be in the house, and she's not in that space because she has rushed home to do gender roles. She has to go home because her husband must come and find when his dinner is ready. She must go and pay attention to children.
Is it a good time for me to thank the husbands of the ladies that we have in studio
I need to say
for allowing them
something
to be here? Yes.
No, because you know,
I'm going to come back to you.
if there's a husband who expects his honorable member of parliament, who's a woman, to come home every single day and serve him dinner, please don't thank that man. He's burdening her in a way that really,
it's quite
No, I'm
unfortunate.
thanking the men who have allowed you to be here. Who have
Well,
not burdened you to be home
he says
at this
allowed.
time, because it's 11 p.m.
I never ask for permission. I do. It has to be negotiated. Okay. It's about negotiation. It's not about I've permitted you.
All right.
I mean, what has given you that
time is going to allow
superiority?
us to go to this to this gender roles thing, because yes, Honorable Adeke.
Well, you see, I really want to thank Owichitiwa. With her years of experience, definitely she speaks with so much knowledge and wisdom, existentialist knowledge. But I remember attending a meeting with Minister Betty Amongi, and she was telling
The Minister
us,
of Gender.
Yes, about telling us her story, how she started off as a young politician and how she's made it. And she said to us, MPs, women MPs, let me tell you, the discussion does not happen in parliament. It happens outside parliament. Everything we want to negotiate for on the floor of parliament happens outside. And she said to us, I have the NSSF amendment. It's going to be on the floor. But I already know what the debate is going to look like. We have already done our talks and negotiations. So, it simply goes to tell us that there's so much that happens behind the closed doors. And that is the most influential. Those are the most influential discussions.
And are you saying that the women are not in these spaces?
It is difficult for women to be in these spaces because, like she said, because of the gender roles that exist. And you see, the struggle that women in public spaces and, positions of influence and leadership face is very different from the one that women in the grassroots face. Although, yes, it's a bit similar, but there are some differences. Because here, you're struggling for space. You've been given space, but you know that the patriarchism is all around you. And you know all the things that disadvantage you so much that you may not be able to efficiently perform as your male counterparts do. So earlier on, before we went down into the gender roles, we were speaking about, the activism, equality, and feminism. And I think that all these really work for us. It depends on how we package them. I will not go to my woman in the village who started having children when she was 12 years old and start telling her, there's something called feminism, there's this. No. First, she needs to be empowered. She's struggling with poverty. She's struggling with domestic abuse. She's struggling with so many things. So before we can have the discussion about, feminism and all these things, can we get her out of that so that she can feel like a worthy human being? Which really is what feminism is about. Because you're looking at, equating people, looking at women as human beings. But you don't package it in such a loaded way.
We don't use big terminologies in all spaces. You discuss the issues because everybody has a lived reality.
Yeah.
So I have a lived reality as an elite woman. Then a woman who's not elite has a different lived reality. So when you're discussing, you talk, you
And
don't
you
say,
see,
you don't say feminism, you don't say
that lived
gender
reality,
equality, you don't say, you talk about what are the issues.
when we talk about men representing the issues of women, you said, no, they
The
can't
perspectives.
they can't quite understand it because, using
Let
the
me
words used
let
now,
me give you an
it's
example
not their
that I
lived
use.
reality. Yes.
Let me give you an example I use every time I am trying to show the perspective thing. When a woman is having a baby, I always ask in the meeting that I've gone to, I ask them, so at that point, what is a woman thinking? What does she want the most? At that time, what are the man's concerns? Now, this woman will go into the hospital. Her concerns are about, can I bring my baby forward? Can I go to alive? Will I be okay after having this baby? She totally does not think about how am I going to pay the hospital bill. She doesn't think about that. Why? Because the gender roles gave the man the role to figure out what to do about the resources of the family. So for him, at that moment in time, yes, he's worried about his wife and child, but he's also worried about paying the bill.
Which are three things.
Which are different
more.
perspectives. So
Yes.
if I had to make a law, if that parliament was full of women, the law would look different. If that parliament was full of just men, they'll probably be trying to find a way to alleviate the hospital bills. You see? But the women would be trying to find a way to make sure that their children are born safely and that they are fine after delivery.
Yes.
So
and that comes to the lived reality.
Yes, perspectives.
And when we cascade that to the woman at the grassroots, the one in the village, the one in poverty, can the women like Honorable Adeke here, like yourself, seated in these spaces, claim to understand the lived reality of that woman who hasn't been to school?
We never have.
Therefore, why isn't the push for her to be the one who gets into decision-making spaces?
Because you have structured the decision-making spaces for elites. They are also elite men.
Yes, but the elite women are part of this.
No, they are elite men who we don't question who they represent. Why should we question who the elite women represent? Why can't she represent herself?
And what I'm saying.
No, I mean, why can't Anne represent herself?
And I'm saying as we do this, we leave that vulnerable woman, the one who usually forms the bigger part of this statistic of the 16 that die while giving birth every day.
I'm going to tell you that actually the elite women of this world are in touch with their non-elite counterparts. More than the elite men are in touch with their non-elite counterparts. Why? Because women are organizing. If I am doing work in FIDA, for instance, because I am a FIDA member,
Thank you.
and I have done a lot of work, voluntary work in FIDA, that means I have been to the grassroots to share information and pick what the women think at the grassroots. And it informs my advocacy. It means that when I set up my office and offer to give free legal aid, an indigent woman, this woman you're talking about, is going to come into my office and I will know what her concerns are. So through women's organizations and the work that women's organizations are doing at the grassroots, I can assure you that the elite woman is very much in touch with her non-elite counterpart. But ask yourself, are the men in touch with their non-elite counterparts? But does anybody ever question that they represent the people? Nobody does. But for us, we have the burden. We are always asked, are you really speaking for this non-elite woman? But who said that I must? If you, a man, is not speaking for your non-elite counterpart and you're representing yourself, why can't I also represent myself? So these are the biases we want. You know, don't overburden one gender and not burden the other.
Yes,
Either
yes.
they should both be burdened or both should be relieved of the burdens. So this is the bias that we are fighting. And when we are talking about these things are real. The impact is real. The impact of bias is so real. It breeds even stigma.
All right. Well, the horrifying statistic on the
Maternal
number of
mortality.
yes, the number of women we lose daily. 16. Well, yesterday I think I had the UN representative quote it as 17 for Uganda, which seems to be worse than the 16 we've been saying for a long time now. With all the advancement that has been made, with the increasing numbers that we've spoken about, what do you attribute this? And with increased budgets to health, yes, more can be done, but increased budgets to health.
Actually,
why
there's no increased budget to health. They're actually reducing.
We had activism, actually. We had women activists up in arms, I think last year, when the budget of health was reduced.
And you remember how
And,
that was.
and you also
But
have
re-
to
but
look
you
at,
remember how
and let
that
me
was
tell you,
explained
you
in
should
Parliament.
not also,
It was explained that that figure went down significantly because it was in relation to infrastructure, because the previous budget had increased by that much because of the renovations that were being done on Mulago
No, but
Hospital.
let me tell
and
you-
taking that out did not take away from the other interventions.
But
it's
then
just that
ask
this
yourself-
huge figure that was being used for the renovation of Mulago was taken out of the budget because it had been done.
But let me tell you, it is a percentage of the total budget.
Yes.
The recommended,
The 15%.
is
Yes.
recommended as of the entire budget, not
Yeah.
just the ministry budget, but the whole national budget. So if the money flowing into government has increased,
And I think we're at about what, 7%?
so this is what I'm saying. You also even have to look at the internal allocation of resources. Now you can see they were allocating more money to renovating Mulago Hospital. It is a national referral hospital. So how many people, you know, they tell them, please don't come, this is the national referral hospital. But then you don't equip the lower levels
That are supporting
that are supposed, such that you don't get too many cases going to the national
All right,
referral.
and
let me tell you also another thing about health. You look at the maternal deaths, that's the most horrifying. But there's horrifying impacts of, you know, if you deliver badly, fistula cases.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of things that are happening with women. There are women losing their uteruses. There are women, you know, you're looking at certain things that are not captured in
Because
this.
the worst has not happened.
Because a person
not
has not died.
Yes.
But they have not died, but what
They are
is their
living with
state of
life
health?
conditions.
What's their state of health? And I can assure you, fistula is one of the most ignored health conditions. It's ignored to the point whereby other people have to come in and support that. Now, I remember when I was serving in the Buganda Kingdom, when you have to take note, when Buganda says that we are focusing on this, you know that either there is stigma attached to that issue or it is an ignored issue. So at some point, the kingdom, for 3 years, the Kabaka's birthday run was dedicated to raising funds to help fistula cases, because fistula was ignored and there was a lot of stigma attached to fistula. I remember, you know, the Pastor Bujingo publicly, you know, said that he left his wife because she had a fistula problem. I don't know if that is true, but if that is the case.
But even if it was, you know,
Exactly.
that's not something that...
So it is stigma. You can see that somebody thinks that he can use it as justification to move on to another woman. Why, with all his resources, his wife could have been fixed.
All right. I go back to, you know, why are these figures, you know, very alarming, very disappointing, and yet, when we talk about the figures in relation to representation, they have increased, which would mean would have more voices speaking about these issues that burden the women, and as an effect, would see some of these numbers coming down. The figure we're talking about at this point is the one on maternal mortality.
Well, one of the most ignored areas in health has been sexual reproductive health. And when we discuss sexual reproductive health, sometimes people want to be coy about it. They don't want to speak truth to it and, say things as they should be. Say, that there are teenagers getting pregnant, there are teenagers having sex, there are teenagers getting pregnant, there are teenagers at risk of getting fistula because their organs are not as well developed. So there is generally the discussion about sexual reproductive health rights, which I feel has not been given priority by our government. But then also there is the access, just the infrastructure, access. Gabriel, I represent a rural constituency. I know sub-counties where mothers have to travel more than 30 kilometers to give birth. If there are health centers there, in most cases they don't have a maternity ward because they are very small. It's just for, basic first aid. So, first of all, infrastructure, especially in the rural areas. Second of all...
And there's rural areas, but there's also hard-to-reach areas, like
hard-to-reach
mountainous areas, like islands.
Yes, like when you go to Kasese. I've been to Kasese and I've seen the terrain. There are places where it's almost impossible for a vehicle to get to. Now, what happens to girls who are pregnant there, to women who are pregnant in such areas? So there is, yes, infrastructure, the infrastructure of health, and then also the infrastructure, of reaching them, the roads and etc. But then again, there is also the labor force, the workforce. The workforce is lacking. You will go to a very, very, very busy district hospital, a very busy health center 3, and find only 2 midwives. And these midwives will complain. They don't have gloves. Gab, do you know, I had I think last year about October, I had to buy gloves for all my health centers in the district. Because nurses were telling mothers, we will not touch you. We can't put our lives at risk. We don't have gloves. Gloves. Mama kit. They ask, where is your mama kit? If you don't bring it,
they don't want.
That's how women die. So you don't have a labor force that is equipped. The ones who are there are overly burdened. They are not paid.
Yes. Honorable Adeke, that goes back to the gist of the question. You identified these things because you interacted with the women in your constituency. You are no longer talking about, the whole health budget as is. You're talking about an aspect within the health budget, something that will seemingly be small. And from the discussion that we're having, maybe something that your male counterparts would not be able to identify. So, why don't we have, for example, government providing these mama kits, government providing these gloves in a sustainable way so that we can reduce on these numbers. We have women in positions where these decisions can be made. The decisions that are big, yes, it's understandable that the numbers come to play and it can be a difficult thing. There's interest at very many levels. But some of these, there can be gains on some of things. And we have seen Parliament stand up and make some of these gains. In the 9th Parliament, Parliament refused to pass the budget until a percentage was added to the health budget. Yes. And it actually was added.
Yes. And just a few days ago on Thursday, the speaker herself during the debate on maternal mortality, I quote, because I heard her, she said, first of all, it is very disappointing that in this day and age, in a country like Uganda, we are not giving our women mama kits. She said it. That is the speaker herself. Very disappointed that until this day and age, until this time, with all these statistics, but we still cannot. No, you see, Gabriel.
Yes.
What I am trying to tell you is that we appropriate, and even if we do, it still remains an executive decision to do as we have advised. You have seen governments spend beyond their budget. When they bring supplement, they are bringing a supplement. I've seen that Ministry of Health is going to ask Finance to bring a supplementary budget. But when they bring supplementary budgets, they bring supplementary budgets for State House, and women are dying. State House alone is consuming how much in billions? Daily. Daily. You have the president's donations, one individual, his donations, reaching to an amount that can build 58 schools. One person, his donations. Now tell me, even if we sing and allocate, if we say 100% of the budget is going to women,
I have had that being explained.
He will still not do it.
I have had that being explained as he is the fountain of honor.
So now you can see
And
where
I'm
the
sure
money
you've
goes.
had- you've had
we
that-
allocate, and then the
explanation.
fountain of honor reallocates and makes its pledges. Why won't he at least allow these systems to be in place for it to function at least, if he is really committed to women?
All right. Ladies, we have to bring
We
this.
must reduce that
We
number.
have to bring this to a
let me
close.
just
But it's
say
important to
something
bring it to a
small.
close with talking about talking about some of the things that need to be done. Yes, some of the big things may be harder to achieve because of the structural, inequalities, difficulties that we have. But there are places where gains can be made. And some of these small gains can lead to big gains. In fact, as we talked about the history of how women got to where they are now, whereas it isn't where women want to be, it was small gains that got us this far, Yes, so yes, you can make the point that you wanted to make, and then we'll come to that.
I wanted to say, just to add to what Honorable Adeke was saying, that, we have a lot of leaks of monies unnecessarily through corruption. And I think that is one of the things
The
we have.
anti-corruption agency,
The
inspectorate in particular, has been put in the hands of women. The IGG, the two deputy
I
IGs,
talked about the
PS
issue
of the
I talked about the issue
integrity.
of power. Please,
yes.
I can have a position, but if I don't have the power and authority that goes with my position, then I cannot do anything. So I'm just there. It's the tokenism we are talking about. They are there, but they do not have real power to make real change. Because women, they would do it. If
10 trillion annually.
If that was possible, they would do it.
Yeah.
But you see, the problem is that I was saying that, we have a governance deficit in this country. And I think we cannot run away from that. And anybody who does that is not solving Uganda's problems, whether for women or anybody. So we need to look at what is it that we need to do as a government. Don't burden women by telling them, what are you women doing for your people? Primarily, government is on with the ultimate responsibility.
You know what?
For us human rights people, we divide the whole thing, anything, we divide it into rights holders and duty bearers. So somebody is bearing the duty. And once we know who that person is, that's where now we have problems. When I talk about governance deficits, the governance deficit is with the duty bearers.
All right.
She spoke about the money that we lose in corruption. It's actually, last year at least, it was about 10 trillion lost in corruption. The fraudulent procurements and etc. and etc. 10 trillion. Imagine what that would do for women in our country.
And that's why
there is no willingness.
That's why you see the priority. The priority is on infrastructure, because nobody can steal money for mama kids, but a person can steal money from buildings by overinflating a budget. I used to work for an anti-corruption agency, so I know what I'm talking about. These people, they inflate budgets, and when they inflate a budget, so they start stealing the money from the time of budgeting. Planning and budgeting, such that by the time the money comes, already some of it is ready to be shaved off.
You have PACs, public accounts committees at district level. You have 2 at parliamentary level, the one for central government and the one for local government.
Capacity.
The problem is capacity.
Capacity. We have leaders, because let me tell you, they set the bar so low for leaders in this country who are supposed to represent the people. They set it so low. Now, when you go to a local government, they told you they don't need a councillor to have any qualification of any sort. So they go there, they want to debate in the local language. The technocrats are producing documents in English. Okay?
There's no way the district budget is going to come in local language.
Why
There's
not?
no way the audited accounts are going to come
Why
in local
not?
language. Who's going to
Don't we have the terminology?
Who is going to audit
don't
them?
we have
Auditor
the
General?
terminology for those things? Don't we have I mean, if you've decided that that is how low you want to set the bar,
Then everything should, it should be
should
a debate that is
yes.
understandable to them,
Yes.
documents in the same language, so that they do justice to
yes.
it.
So it's not that, when I talk about capacity, I'm not saying that the people there are maybe somehow, because they are, what can I say, we don't demand them to have certain qualifications. But I think also the ability to debate something depends on several factors. Your ability to understand what has been presented before you, and your ability to actually relate what you're discussing with the impact it can have on the average citizen. So as far as I am concerned, I think we have a lot to do in this country in terms of governance. I think we have a lot to do in terms of equipping our leaders to be transformational leaders. And I know women can be transformational leaders as long as they are given the power that goes with the positions that they occupy.
All right. Well, I'd like to hear how we go to the next level, because 8th of March is going to come next year. And, you know, we don't want to be lamenting or complaining about the very same things. In fact, I'd like to take it to the level of, you are in privileged positions. How do we start to harness at least the small gains, so that at the end of the day, the momentum, the sacrifices that were made by the women that came before, you know, can be built upon, so that we don't see stagnation or even a reversal, moving backwards, retrogression. Yes, I will start with you, Honorable Adeke.
Well, you invited us, and we are all politicians. And for us, we really understand what political power means, and what political will to do something can achieve. And for me, really, I'm just saying that we will not stop mobilizing and organizing as women. And me, because I'm a politician, my political beliefs are very clear. I will not stop mobilizing women for a cause that I feel is noble, and to organize them to take a direction that I feel will help us, will give us the answers that we've been looking for. We've been at this point for the last 10 or so years, speaking of the same numbers, crying of the same challenges our girls face in schools, of sanitary pads, and the best we could secure was an empty promise, a campaign promise for our girls. They've never been given sanitary towels. They're still dropping out because of those reasons. We've been at this point speaking and crying about the maternal mortality.
Right. If we just picked sanitary towels for school-going girls, why don't we see, for example, the women member of parliament, member of parliament, and under UOPA you even have men who are associate members saying, you know, we are not going to pass the budget, and we advocate that the rest of the members do not pass this budget if we do not have money for, you know, sanitary towels for school-going girls, because this was a pledge made in a manifesto that you say is being implemented.
Well, we've severally debated about sanitary pads, and the Speaker has been on record. We are in the budget process, and still the Ministry of Education was asked about.
I think what I'm asking is, how about doing it another way, being more radical? Because
well, you
debating seems not to get the attention that you know you would want for an issue.
Frankly, Gabriela, I need to I wish there was someone from NRM here, so they would bear us witness. Just as Owechiti was said, the women and how the women in NRM are manipulated is so much more different, and members of the NRM, they'll outwardly agree with you, but when they go to such spaces, make different decisions. I'm telling you, we can state that, yes, as members of the opposition, this is what we shall stand with, and ask them to be with us on that cause. But when we go to the floor, they'll change their minds because they're working for a CEO. They have someone who they take, you know, they have a dictator in their face who's threatening them with all kinds of threats and telling them, you know, you're going to lose, or I'm going to crack down on you. So, you see, they are bullied, honestly speaking. The NRM MPs are bullied, not just once, but severally.
All right.
We have had noble causes collapse on that floor.
If we looked within your parties, and you are castigating the NRM at this point, key positions have been given to women in the NRM. Let's come to your parties. I believe your party is led by a male. Your party is also led by a male. Before that was a male. Before that was a male. You know, your secretary generals are male.
No, I've had a female secretary general at the FDC.
Yes, but right now your secretary general is male.
But we have had a female. We've had a female. The
majority of your top leaders are male. And yet you want the party in power, the NRM, to look significantly different. And if they look at your parties, well, the difference you're talking about is not reflected in your parties.
No, frankly, we are changing that. We are changing that. Because to have me, a young woman, first of all, a young person, and a woman at such a high decision-making level in my party is a score in itself. I'm not there to keep quiet.
If I say to
I'm there, number one. First of all, we have to get women to participate in political parties. It's not been the case for very long. You know that, especially in the opposition. Because you know how government has brutalized politicians in the opposition, they have continued to make it unsafe for women to listen, to identify with us in the opposition. That's number one. Because they feel very scared. I'll tell you, yesterday we were celebrating Women's Day celebrations, and there were police deployment. So how many women can feel free to come into such an environment when they know they're going to be tear gassed, they're not sure if they will go back home? Government, the NRM government, has made it unsafe, increasingly unsafe and impossible for women in the opposition.
So, Honorable, yes.
So, first of all, we are mobilizing not in ordinary circumstances. They are very tough times for us as women.
All right. And those are good points that you make. But, Honorable Adeke, your appointment, if I said it is also tokenism, would you agree? Because when the NRM did it, you called it tokenism. Your party has done it. Isn't it tokenism?
Well, no, I wouldn't call it tokenism. First and most importantly is that my voice it matters very much in my party. Those ones who have been in NEC know it. I chair meetings, I make decisions, I'm leading delegations. My voice matters in the space that I am in. I'll tell you that for sure. It is different from our sisters in the NRM. We hear their voices, but in the status quo, their voices disappear. They don't count. Because if our speaker can ask why, in this day and age, women don't have mama kids, why wouldn't her government do that? Because she's NRM. So she has a very strong voice. But in the party, it disappears. You understand? It may be the case for all our sisters in the NRM who are given positions, they truly understand the plight of women. But in their party, their voices all disappear.
All right.
So you see, I may tick all the boxes, but the most important thing, so that it doesn't look like, you know, what I've called surface diversity, is that I actually bring those qualities on the table and make it count. Make it count that I am young. Make it count that I am a woman. So important are those two to me that everywhere I go, it is what I found. It is what I have chosen. It is my struggle.
All right. OHT, and we really need to bring this to a close.
Yes, I'm telling you that the Democratic Party is a party that has had a woman vice president as well in the past. And I can assure you that the Democratic Party has had a vice president, the Honorable Betty Namboze, when she was serving. We do occupy substantive positions. Just because I'm here as a Deputy Secretary General does not mean that women in DP have never held substantive positions, and that it does not mean that they are not there.
When they held those positions, did their voices count?
Yes. You can't tell me that you are not hearing Honorable Namboze's voice. She was Vice President Buganda region. She was once the spokesperson of the party, the National Publicity Secretary.
Within the party?
Within the party, yes. Within the party. You know, the thing with DP is that each of us is elected by the National Delegates Conference. So you owe your position to the National Delegates Conference, and you're accountable to the National Delegates Conference, not to anybody. So when you're doing what you're doing, you know that you're going to answer to them.
Okay.
So for us, it is the positions we occupy as women are substantive, and we have made a big contribution. You asked what can we do different?
Yes.
To change for women. Now let me tell you, people should know that their vote counts. Women should know that their vote counts. They should put their vote where it counts. And for us in the Democratic Party, we are very inclusive. We have made our Women's League a totally semi-autonomous body. You're soon going to see its impact. We have adopted a gender policy. We know that there's sexual harassment in all parties. A damning report recently came out across our parties, all of them, that sexual harassment is an issue. So we passed that kind of policy in our party to make it a safe space for women. And generally for us, inclusion has been written in our constitution from the time when the party was founded. So people can't go wrong by voting DP.
All right, ladies, we need to give our parting shots. We couldn't go on until 1 a.m. because I also think it's unfair to, focus, discussions on the women's issues just once a year, because...
I actually wanted to say it. I was very outraged that it was only this week that I saw all women panels. And it's going to be that way this week, and then we'll go back to the usual. Yes, the factory settings. But it should not be that way.
Honorable Deke, no, at least not here at SEETV. We always make an effort. We always make an effort, to reach out to women to come for these discussions. But like you said, because of the gender roles, it becomes very complicated because the show is at 10 p.m. That's when the show is. And not many women are able to actually come at 10 p.m. And that's why we applaud you for being here until this time. But we'll always continue to reach out. But we also have a show that is going to run for the whole month dedicated to women and what's being done to uplift the woman of Uganda. And we have a show called Sunrise at Sea. It's hosted by, it used to be 4 women, now 3 women. So exclusively, hosted by women. So yes, we're trying here at Sea, and I hope that we can do more and more.
Everyone is trying.
Yes,
because that's what you said, that little steps. Yes. So if everybody tries,
yes,
women will see
collectively,
transformation.
Yes,
I sincerely hope that we can continue to discuss women beyond just this month. And dedicate time to discuss women issues, at least for these talk shows. At least every week there should be something featuring about women, because the media does so much in defining people's perspectives. And so if you're intentional about it, you would really be our co-workers in this. Yeah.
All right. We need to give our parting shots. OHT, well, I will begin with you. Everything we have said, we now need to wrap it up and give a way forward.
You know, it's hard to wrap up things
I
in
know.
1 second.
That's why.
But for me, I can only say that women have been in the struggle a long time. We just pass on the baton to the next, to the next. So let us be, whichever woman, wherever you are, whatever position you occupy, it does not matter which position you occupy, as long as you have a position. Even if you're just a mother in your home, make sure that you use that position to change the lives of the next generation. Hand over the baton to the next generation so that the lives keep improving for the women. And much as we say, you know, in all struggles, a luta continua, for us we know that victory for women is certain and it is coming. And that's the encouragement I want to give women. I want to ask them to be committed to changing the lives of future women by breaking down barriers and making sure that we deliver the next generation to a much better place than we were, because we are only tall now because we stand on the shoulders of taller women. So I would like to wrap this up by thanking you so much for hosting us and requesting you that for every issue you discuss, there is a gender perspective, that it is okay to call us to discuss any issue, because there will be a gender perspective. And that way, Anne will be a very happy woman. I will be a very happy woman.
I will call. I will call. I hope you will answer.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the show, and thank you to everyone who tuned in. I sincerely feel that we have come a long way, and I feel that also we've been at this mountain for too long, and I certainly aspire that as women, the stunted affirmative action can be fixed, that we need to reinvigorate our struggle and pick up from where we are and make other leaps, because so much still has to be done. And in every space that we are in, we need to focus on breaking the bias, ending the biases against women in our workspaces, in our home environments, in our church spaces, in every space that we occupy as women. I know that there is a bias that exists. And so as a woman in each and every space, work to break the bias. Thank you very much.
Honorable Anna Ebaju Adeke, Soroti District Woman Member of Parliament, also FDC Deputy President, Eastern Region, and Owechitiwa Christine Mugerwa Kasule, Deputy Secretary General of the Democratic Party. Thank you for being on the Big Debate tonight. Dear viewer, thank you for joining us for this edition of the Big Debate. I hope you have learned and picked inspiration from the two ladies. We hope that you will be able to join us next week when we have another debate. But for now, let's break the bias and don't blink. Good night.